Greetings, my name is Ryan. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. Joining me here today is Matt. Matt, say hi.
Hey guys, my name is Matt Slott and I'm a principal solution architect at Veeam Kasten.
Matt, Veeam, backup, recovery, data resilience.
Yes.
I want to explore using it for something that it's not necessarily meant for. So a lot of the customers I work with are going through a migration, and in that migration context, this is typically something like Red Hat OpenShift, and I see obviously some movement from on-premises into the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of customers exploring a shift towards managed, so I see a self-managed environment moving to managed. This is typically Red Hat OpenShift container platform, and the managed version typically becomes a ROSA. And then you and I had a discussion earlier this week where we were talking about, development teams and things where they've got a high degree of autonomy. The application owners make their own decisions, and you end up with a very, very mixed bag of locations, whether this is on premises, whether it's on cloud, whether it's different container platforms. So, self-rolled Kubernetes, a little bit of OpenShift, sometimes the cloud provider Kubernetes-based solution cropping in there. And then later on, there is a organizational change, and there is a standardization and consolidation.
Exactly. It's essentially a shadow IT problem. It's a classic problem, but developers are most comfortable in the platform typically that they've learned in. So they'll often develop in that platform. But as you mentioned, when it's time to go to production, we may need to consolidate that into our enterprise's chosen cloud or platform.
So, ultimate question I have is, can we take a backup solution like Veeam that is already backing up a lot of the app building blocks here, mm-hmm, and use that as a way of moving the data across? Is this a secret sword that we could be using?
Absolutely. So yeah, we actually have a number of customers that have done exactly that. We're primarily a data resilience DR backup product, but by the nature of backing up and having all of the data of our applications and their configuration, we can move that data and metadata into a new environment.
But if we look at what Veeam backs up, it's first and foremost, it's backing up containerized application workloads. Mm-hmm. So these are container apps. It's going to back up the definition or the configuration of that app. Mm-hmm. It is going to back up the actual data itself if this is persistent in nature. Mm-hmm. What else?
So the only other thing to really consider here is if we have CRDs in the cluster, right? So custom resource definitions, Kasten can help protect that as well using cluster scope policies.
Am I correct in saying that typically we're not backing up the cluster configuration in its own right? So this would normally be take a new destination cluster. Let's say if we're going from on-premises into ROSA, we would deploy ROSA on AWS. We would do configuration there. One of the configurations we'd probably do is Kasten itself. Mm-hmm. And then go and replay the application workloads or those backups.
Yes, exactly. We protect Kubernetes applications, not necessarily Kubernetes itself. We treat Kubernetes, whether it's OpenShift, whether it's on-prem or in public cloud or EKS or whatever flavor of Kubernetes, we treat that as essentially commoditized infrastructure. So we protect the application, the metadata, and any dependencies they may have in the cluster.
For existing customers, could this be a DR test cutover? So, could this be, I'm using Kasten already as part of my backup recovery option. I'm now going to just test and validate a restore into a new cluster, say on AWS in ROSA, flip it over, and then I'm there. Is that a common pattern?
Yes, exactly. It's something we encourage from a disaster recovery and business continuity perspective. A lot of organizations have compliance requirements where they have to demonstrate the ability to recover quickly, and Kasten can essentially be the conduit for that. And ideally, if you're doing a true DR test and trying to build your DR program, it's best to stay over there, operate for a set period of time, and then switch back maybe in a 3-month or 6-month time period.
Go. Now, Red Hat themselves have created a collection of toolkits, and one of them I want to draw attention to is the migration toolkit for containers. They've got a couple of these, but we've got the migration toolkit for containers. It is literally a repackaging of several open source projects that form part of the Conveyor family. But we install the migration toolkit onto one of the OpenShift clusters, and we can essentially pull the configuration from the source to the destination. Mm-hmm. However, that is going to do some of the things that Kasten doesn't do. It's going to pull through the OpenShift configuration itself. It's a little bit more inclusive. Mm-hmm. It's not a DR tool. It's a migration tool. So it lends itself very nicely to a once-off migration. Mm-hmm. One thing it doesn't do is it's really designed for like to like. So it's OpenShift to OpenShift. Mm-hmm. And when we get to this consolidation requirement where we could be dealing with a mixed bag, mm-hmm. it doesn't do that very well. So there we could end up with a lot more manual interaction. You mentioned something like transforms. Exactly. Talk to me about those. How do those come into the picture here?
So transforms are built into the product. It's essentially there to help for exactly this scenario, right? So if we're moving from dissimilar environments, we need to make sure we can apply some changes as we're moving or migrating. So things like storage classes, or another common one is like ingress or ingress classes may change from an on-premises to a public cloud, or from one flavor of Kubernetes to OpenShift. And with transforms, we can essentially manipulate that when we're restoring to our destination, so we ensure the application actually comes up.
If we're talking about an environment that is similar, mm-hmm. what are you seeing as more common? Is it something like Veeam? Is it something like the migration toolkit? Or is it really a mixed bag and it depends on the nuances of what the customer's dealing with?
I'd say it's the latter. It's definitely a mixed bag. And at the end of the day, you still need to protect these workloads, right? So as you mentioned, migration toolkit for containers is great for coming from OpenShift, going to OpenShift, but it's not a backup or DR tool. So we have customers that maybe use migration toolkit for containers to get their workloads from one OpenShift cluster to another, but once it's in that destination, they then use Veeam Kasten to provide the DR backup, and then can further now use Veeam Kasten for mobility as well.
Okay, so this is in the context of container applications that are already on OpenShift. Mm-hmm. Edge case. We're seeing a growing trend of virtualization. Customers take their virtual machines and bring them into a Kubernetes platform. I'm assuming you would first need to migrate from that virtual machine environment into OpenShift before Kasten became relevant. So something like the migration toolkit for VMs, get it from your existing virtualization stack into OpenShift, mm-hmm. and then you could use Kasten as a backup and recovery option, mm-hmm. or if you had those VMs inside a self-managed environment on OpenShift virtualization, you could possibly then use Kasten to make that transition into a managed ROSA environment, because once those VMs are there, they're now containerized workloads.
Exactly, and we recommend using MTV if you're coming from a traditional virtualization infrastructure to OpenShift virtualization. Once it's in OpenShift virtualization, yes, Veeam Kasten can protect those VM workloads.
Kasten available on the Red Hat Operator Hub. It is available on AWS Marketplace. We've got a pay-go option. We've also got a one-year sort of terms. And talk to me about where can we get more information around Kasten? Where can we get real deep dive information on some of these use cases?
For sure. So first and foremost, I'm going to do a little bit of self-plug. We actually have a Red Hat OpenShift reference architecture focused primarily on virtualization that's available on Veeam.com. So all of what we're discussing here is covered in that reference architecture. We talk about using things like EBS or FSX in that reference architecture when we get into something like AWS's cloud. In addition to going to Veeam.com, definitely check out veeamkasten.dev. We have a number of interactive tools. We actually have a specific interactive demo around migrating OpenShift workloads from non-OpenShift to OpenShift.
Is there a magic silver bullet? One size fits all? No. So if you do want to have a deeper conversation with us around which is the best fit for you, please reach out to either your Red Hat, AWS or Veeam account teams, and we will pull all the other stakeholders in. Absolutely happy to have these conversations with you and understand where you, the customer, are coming from and how we can combine these different options to help you be successful. Matt, thank you very much for joining me. As always, it's a pleasure.
Always, yeah. Thank you so much for having me as well. I definitely enjoyed it and looking forward to our next one.
And thank you.